Once upon a time, there was a girl called Henrietta who found a doorway to another world.
Chapter 12. A Crack in the World. Henrietta stood a few metres from the edge of Mariana's Gorge, staring down into a canyon so deep the bottom was hidden in mist. It was as though the world had split apart, leaving a crack that stretched as far as she could see to her left and to her right. The world had broken into two pieces, with Henrietta on one side, gazing at the forest of the tree pigs on the other. "What is it?" she said. "Big ravine," said Gret unhelpfully, as he set up 3 fold-away chairs and a small table outside the back door to his cottage. The evening sun was brighter here, where there were no trees in the way. It hung low in the sky, soaking the clouds in warm red light, and Henrietta had to shade her eyes with her hand to see. On the other side of the gorge, she could make out the pink blobs of the tree pigs, sprouting from the treetops in the forest from which they had come. Gret's house had stepped over the chasm as if it was a crack in the pavement, rather than a hole in the world. Now Gret was setting up for breakfast, on the verge of a plummeting drop that might go down forever. "How did it get so deep?" said Henrietta. "I think rivers make them, don't they?" said Gret. "That's why it's called a ravine, because it's got a river in." The opposite side of the gorge fell steeply away from the edge, and gargantuan banners were suspended there, each displaying a portrait of the king, his featureless face the size of a house and his feet lost in the mist below. Beside the pictures were towering slogans such as "Long live King Herman" and "King Herman is your best friend" and "King Herman likes you, like him back." "I wish Lena was here," said Henrietta. "Who?" said Gret. "Lena!" Henrietta couldn't stop her voice sounding irritated. "My friend, who I'm looking for." "I thought you said she was here, because if she's not in underspace, we're searching in the wrong world." "No, I mean right here, with me now," said Henrietta. She knew something strange was going on, and I didn't believe her. But look how right she was. She'd be so excited. "We'll find her soon enough," said Gret, in a voice softer than Henrietta was used to. "And then you can be excited together." Henrietta turned from the ravine to find Dagenham sitting expectantly at the table, with Gret standing beside him. "Breakfast's ready," said Gret. "And I must say," said Dagenham, "I'm impressed to see you filthy humans eating off a table for a change, instead of gobbling it up off the floor like you usually do." "I take food very seriously," said Gret. "And what are we having?" asked Dagenham. "You," said Gret. "Fried." Dagenham grunted in a way that was half shocked and half furious. Gret laughed. "We're not eating Dagenham," said Henrietta, hurrying over to the table and sitting beside the distressed little pig. "No, of course not. I was only joking or whatever. I made cheese omelettes and I certainly wasn't thinking they'd be nice with a bit of bacon." Gret disappeared into the cottage, emerging a few seconds later with 3 plates, each containing a golden omelette and 2 slices of steaming buttered toast. He placed them down in front of Henrietta and Dagenham, then put the third before his own chair and sat down. "Tuck in," he said. Henrietta grabbed the glass of water closest to her on the table and gulped most of it down before pausing for breath. Then she picked up her fork, used it to cut off a small piece of omelette, stabbed it, and put it into her mouth. She was surprised to find that Gret made unusually good omelettes. "So this is eating," said Dagenham. "It's more complicated than I'd been led to believe." Dagenham tilted his head and grabbed his omelette between his teeth. He gnawed it carefully until some came away, then twitched his head backwards to flick it fully into his mouth, like a duck swallowing breadcrumbs. "Have you never eaten before?" said Henrietta. "Tree pigs get all their nutrients through their head stalks," said Dagenham, "until we get knocked out of our tree by a murderer. Then we have to start using our mouths like savages." "What do tree pigs normally eat?" "Oh, everything. Sandwiches, cheese sandwiches." Dagenham grabbed another piece of omelette in his mouth and swallowed it, a little less clumsily this time. "Our stomachs can handle anything," Dagenham said proudly. "Except pork, obviously. And grass." "Why can't you eat grass?" "Because we're not sheep," said Dagenham. "Right."
And because tree pigs are allergic to grass. If we eat it, we get light-headed and dizzy, and it makes us fall over and vomit. And sometimes, when tree pigs eat grass, they put on colourful hats and sing loudly.
You mean you get drunk? Said Gret through a mouthful of omelette.
What?
You're describing being drunk, said Gret. Falling over and singing and vomiting. That's drunkenness. Grass obviously gets tree pigs drunk.
No, we're allergic and we never eat it, said Dagenham. Except sometimes we might have 1 or 2 blades on the king's birthday. You know, just to celebrate how good the king is and get the party started.
Henrietta instinctively turned to the gorge, where the evening sun beat down on the many giant faces of the king, with no mouth, no nose, no ears, and 2 tiny dots where the eyes should be. From either side of the mask sprouted his enormous horns, curling around themselves like he was a goat pretending to be a man. "Does he ever take his mask off?" Henrietta asked.
What?
Said Gret, twisting his neck to see what she was talking about. "Oh, him? No, never. This woman I know, Jenny the Genius, says that the king wears that mask because he hasn't got a face, because he lost it in some terrible accident." "What kind of accident?"
"I don't know, I didn't ask," said Gret. "What kind of accident makes your face fall off?"
"No kind of accident."
"This other woman I know, Marjorie Twit, reckons that the king does have a face, but it's not where it should be."
"What does that mean?" asked Henrietta with a shudder. "His face isn't on his head, it's somewhere else on his body," said Gret. "Marjorie Twit swears she once saw the king's manservant bend down and whisper to the king's leg." "I don't know," said Henrietta. "I think he wears the mask to hide who he really is."
"Why would he need to do that?"
"Because people like us would recognise him if we could see his face."
"Maybe," said Gret. "I'll tell you what, though, the mask isn't even the worst thing about him. The worst thing is, when you meet him, he never says a word. That's why they call him Herman the Mute, because he never speaks to anybody except his manservant. He just sits there and stares at you. You never know what he's thinking."
"What if he wants a drink or something?" asked Henrietta.
"He whispers to his manservant, and you have to wait to find out whether he ordered a glass of water or your execution."
"So no one's ever heard the king's voice?"
"Only the king's manservant," said Gret.
"And he talks to the king's leg?"
"He?" said Gret. "Who's he?"
"The manservant?"
Gret chewed his mouthful of egg and toast, swallowed deliberately, then pointed at Henrietta and laughed. "The manservant's not a he, you chin banana. The manservant's a woman," he said. Then to Dagenham, "She thinks the king's manservant is a man." "What an idiot," said Dagenham with his mouth full. It was the most friendly Gret and Dagenham had been since they'd met. Perhaps the first time they'd said anything to each other that wasn't an insult. It was a shame it had to be calling Henrietta stupid. "She's called Manservant Pamela," said Gret. "She goes everywhere with the king."
"But how can a woman be a manservant?"
"Women can be whatever they want nowadays, can't they? Doctor, judge, policeman." Gret shot Henrietta a reassuring wink. "It's a long time since the bad old days when women weren't allowed to be policemen."
Henrietta decided that, on occasions such as this, it was best simply to ignore Gret. "So manservant Pamela always talks to the king's leg," she said. "Don't people think that's weird?"
"Oh, no, I think that just happened once," said Gret. "Or maybe Marjorie Twit made it up. She tends to lie about things."
"Well, don't people think it's strange that the king always wears a mask? Don't they want to see his face?"
Gret stretched his mouth into a smug smile and waved his fork at Henrietta. "Do you want to know the first rule of detection?" he said.
"Not really."
"Never drink anything that's got a fish living in it," said Gret. "That's not important right now, but the second rule is." "What's the second rule?" asked Dagenham. "Don't ask too many questions, because you might not like the answers."
"That's a stupid rule," said Henrietta.
"Which one? The fish one? To be honest, I haven't always followed that rule perfectly."
"Not the fish one," said Henrietta, although she did think that was a stupid rule too. "How can you be a detective that doesn't ask questions?"
Gret tapped the side of his nose and winked. "You learn to ask the right questions," he said.
They continued to talk as they finished eating, about the gorge, about where they were going, and what they'd do when they got there. Henrietta asked Gret and Dagenham questions about underspace and didn't get a single straight answer from either of them. Eventually, they all finished eating and sat back in their chairs, or in Dagenham's case, curled up on his. Gret stretched out, resting his arms on his stomach, and closed his eyes. "Shouldn't we be going?" Henrietta asked. "It's bad for the digestion to start running around too quickly after eating," said Gret. "The best thing you can do is have a nap for an hour or so." "We can't do that. We have to find Lena." "All right, fine. Let's sit and rest for 10 minutes, and then we can get moving." Gret took a deep breath and belched loudly. "Why don't you tell us a story while we're here?" "What story?" said Henrietta. "Don't care. You choose. Entertain us while we digest." "I don't think I know any stories," said Henrietta.
"You don't know any stories?" said Dagenham in disbelief. "I do. I probably know, 10 stories."
"10? That's very impressive," said Gret. "Tell us one, then."
"They're tree pig stories," said Dagenham. "I don't think we're supposed to share them with humans."
"What if it was your job to tell stories?" asked Gret.
"Then I'd be a storytelling pig," said Dagenham, "which would be good, because at least then I'd have a job, instead of being an unemployed fugitive pig, which is what I am."
"What's so good about having a job?" said Gret.
"You've got to have a job," said Dagenham. "There's no point being alive otherwise. You've got to have a purpose."
"But there must be some pigs who don't get jobs. Pigs who decide to do something else with their lives."
"No," said Dagenham flatly.
"So," said Gret, "no pig has ever thought, do you know what? I don't want to get a boring job. I want to be my own person. Maybe start my own detective business, like Gret Detective. He's a genius and an inspiration, and we should all try and be worthy of his shining example." Are you telling me no pigs ever said that? Because I find that very difficult to believe.
"Every pig gets a job. It's what we do," said Dagenham, his voice full of finality. "Except for Pignacious and Hambert, obviously."
"Who are Pignacious and Hambert?" asked Henrietta.
"It's a story my Uncle Preston used to tell me, about 2 pigs who decided not to get a job and so came to a very sticky end, probably."
"Probably?"
"Well, they might have lived happily ever after, I don't know."
"You don't know what happened at the end of the story?"
"Of course I know what happened at the end of the story, but I don't know what happened after the end of the story."
"Sounds rubbish," said Gret. "Perhaps I'll have a nap instead."
"It's not rubbish," said Dagenham. "It's my favourite story, because it's good and also very good."
"Prove it," said Gret.
"OK, I will."
Gret closed his eyes and turned his face to enjoy the warmth of the setting sun. Dagenham cleared his throat importantly and began to speak, as if reciting the story from memory. The Tale of Pignacious and Hambert. Once upon a time, in the forest of the tree pigs, there lived a one-eyed pig called Pignacious Pork. Pignacious had not lost his eye in an unfortunate accident. He had been born, or sprouted, with only one eye. The other pigs in the tree thought that Pignacious was imperfect. They thought that because he only had one eye, Pignacious could see less than they could. But Pignacious knew that they were wrong. With his single eye, he could see much more. "Why is it so important to get a job?" he would say. "Why must we do jobs that humans choose for us? What if my destiny lies elsewhere?" On the tree next to Pignacious was his slightly older and riper cousin, Hambert P. Hamington. "Shut up, Pignacious," Hambert would reply, since it was the middle of the night and he was busy pretending to sleep. "We have to get a job because that's what tree pigs do." "But why do we? And what if we don't? What then?" "You can't get to Pig Elysium if you don't get a job. Unless you want to go to the palace and volunteer to be the king's dinner." Pignacious gazed out over the treetops and thought, there must be another way to get to Pig Elysium, without having to get a job and work for your whole life, and without having to be someone's dinner. There has to be a third way. Several months later, Pignacious the one-eyed pig was hanging from the tree, pondering the great mysteries of the universe, when a massive bird landed on him.
"Get off me," said Pugnacious. "Squawk," said the bird. But it was too late. The bird had put too much weight on Pugnacious, and he felt his head stalk snap. "I'm being plucked," he yelled. Pugnacious flapped his legs and desperately tried to find something to grab onto. He found Hambert P. Hamilton. "Look!" shouted Hambert. But it was too late for him too. Pugnacious and Hambert plummeted to the ground and landed with a kathunk in a pile of dead leaves. "You plucked me," said Hambert. "It wasn't my fault. That heavy bird knocked me out of the tree." "You didn't have to take me with you. I was perfectly happy. I could have lasted another 6 months. Look how unripe I am." Hambert showed Pugnacious's belly. Pugnacious thought he looked quite overripe. "You know what we have to do now, don't you?" said Hambert. "I think I do, yeah," said Pugnacious. "We have to get a job. We have to get a rubbish job and spend the rest of our lives being miserable, probably in an office with no windows." "But Hambert," said Pugnacious, "what if we don't get a job?" "Don't be stupid, you've got to get a job. That's what tree pigs do. If we don't have a job, we'll have no purpose, and we won't get to Pig Elysium." "We would have a purpose," said Pugnacious. "Our purpose would be not to get a job. Our purpose would be to enjoy our lives. Our purpose would be to find a third way to get to Pig Elysium." "I don't think they'd let us," said Hambert, glancing around at the tree trunks nervously. "That's why we have to leave. We'll strike out through the forest and out the other side. We'll go as far as we can and see what we find there. We'll be the first tree pig explorers." Hambert wrinkled his piggy brow thoughtfully. Then a smile spread across his face. "In a way," he said slowly, "explorer is a job, isn't it?" They walked for days through the forest. They feasted on berries and leaves and drank from clear pools and streams. They rested at the bases of trees with the reassuring sound of pigs grumbling above their heads. They even started to hear chatter about themselves, as word got out about 2 pigs who decided not to get a job and vanished into the forest instead. 2 pigs who had exchanged the chance of eternity in paradise for a life of ignominy and adventure, and an almost certainly sticky end in Pig Tartarus. Footnote: extract from the Complete History and Fistory of Underspace. Tree pigs believe that if you're a good pig, work hard, follow the rules, etc., you'll go to Pig Elysium, where you'll hang forever in the mighty pig tree alongside all the greatest pigs in history. But if you're a naughty pig, rebellious, lazy, independent, you get sent to Pig Tartarus, the underworld, pig hell, where there are no trees, and the food is rubbish, and the chairs are uncomfortable, and there's nothing to do except listen to concerts by Vikram the violin pig, who can't play the violin, but does anyway. "They'll come to no good," said every pig on every tree they passed. "They'll meet a sticky end, probably." After almost a week of walking, they reached the edge of the trees and the beginning of a wide, empty plain, which stretched out as far as the eye could see. "The land of glue," said Pugnacious. "I don't think we can just walk into it," said Hambert. "Pigs who walk into the land of glue get stuck there, and no one knows why." They sat beside the land of glue and wondered about the unsolvable mystery of why pigs got stuck there. After about 10 minutes of silent pondering, a deep voice behind them said, "Hey, little pig dudes, I can help you cross the land of glue safely, if you want." They spun around to find a tall human wearing colourful robes and a pointy hat. "Where did you come from?" said Pugnacious. "I wizarded here," said the man, "because I'm a wizard, so I can do that." "And you can help us cross the land of glue?" said Pugnacious. "I can give you the knowledge to cross safely and without getting stuck," said the wizard. "And you know what's on the other side?" "No." "It's the centre of the world, little pig dudes, where the great artist lives." Pugnacious and Hambert's mouths dropped open. They stared out over the barren wasteland, into the endless mists of nothing and no one and nowhere. "The great artist?"
said Pignacious softly. They had never dreamed that the great artist lived anywhere, not in this world. They had never imagined that he might have a house and that you could walk up to his front door and knock. It had never occurred to them that you could actually go and meet God. "Is it true," asked Pignacious, remembering a story that Uncle Pigglewick used to tell them, "that in the great artist's realm there's an entrance to Pig Elysium?" "Yes," said the wizard. "He's got a ladder." "He's got a ladder to Pig Elysium?" Hambert repeated. "The direct route." "How do we get to the great artist's house?" asked Pignacious. "Hey, slow down, sister," said the wizard. "First you have to solve my riddle. But listen, okay? If you succeed, I'll tell you what you want to know. But if you fail, I'm going to eat you." "What?" "With apple sauce." Pignacious and Hambert glanced at each other nervously. They'd always been told not to trust humans, and now the first one they'd ever met was threatening to eat them. "Is the riddle difficult?" asked Pignacious. "No, it's easy." "Really, honestly?" "You'll get it no problem. Then I'll tell you how to get across the land of glue and you'll live happily ever after in Pig Elysium." Pignacious turned his one eye to Hambert and gave him a look that said, "We can't give up now. We've come too far." "We'll do it," said Hambert. "What's the riddle?" "Here we go," said the wizard. "What eats off the floor in the morning, eats off the floor at lunchtime, and eats off the floor in the evening, and probably has several snacks off the floor between meals as well, the dirty beast?" Pignacious and Hambert didn't pause before answering. "A human," they said together. "Correct. I told you it was easy. Although, when I asked that question to a human a few weeks ago, he didn't have a clue." "Aren't you a human?" asked Hambert. "No way, dude. I'm a space wizard. I eat humans if they can't answer my riddle. But I'll tell you this. I put them on a plate first. I don't eat my dinner off the floor. I'm not a filthy human." The space wizard and the two tree pigs sat together for a time and talked about how disgusting humans were. Finally, the wizard told them how to safely cross the land of glue, and they were surprised at how simple it was, if only you knew the secret. Pignacious and Hambert thanked the wizard because they were good, polite tree pigs and set off, never to be heard of by pig kind again. Chapter 13, Where the Sun Never Sets. "Is that the end?" asked Gret. "Yes," said Dagenham. "What happened to Pig 1 and Pig 2? "You mean Pignacious and Hambert?" "Whatever. The two pigs in your rubbish story. What happened to them?" Dagenham scowled across the breakfast table at Gret, as if he were the stupidest member of a stupid team called Team Stupid. "No one knows. That's the end. They ran away and met some terrible or wonderful or average fate." "I think we should get moving," said Henrietta. "We'll never find Lena if we sit here talking all day." "You can't finish a story with, and no one knows what happened to them. Nobody would read Rapunzel if it went, once upon a time there was a girl up a tower, but no one knew what happened to her at the end." "What's Rapunzel?" said Dagenham. "A story," said Gret, "about a girl up a tower." "Never heard of it," said Dagenham. "I know a tree pig story called Pigpunzel, about a pig up a tower." "Seriously," said Henrietta, growing a little irritated, "I think we should go." "Pigpunzel," said Gret. "It's a fairy tale," said Dagenham, "like Little Red Riding Pig, or Pignocchio, or Rumpelstiltskin." "Are you listening to me?" said Henrietta. "Tree pigs have a rich tradition of storytelling," said Dagenham. "And our stories are completely unique and much better than human stories. We enjoy sharing them while we hang in our trees and never sleep because the sun never goes down." Henrietta was about to raise her voice and demand they pay her attention when she registered what Dagenham had said. "The sun never goes down," she repeated. Henrietta looked up at the crimson sky across the gorge where the sun hung low over the forest of the tree pigs. It hasn't moved, she said, shielding her eyes from the glare.
What are you banging on about? Said Gret.
The sun. I've been here for hours and it hasn't moved. It should have set, or gone up. Why hasn't the sun moved?
The sun never moves, said Gret. It just hangs there, getting in your eyes the whole time.
But why?
I don't know, ask the pig.
Dagenham, why doesn't the sun go down?
It used to, Dagenham explained. It used to go down in the evening and come up again in the morning. It was nice because then it was dark at night and you could get some sleep.
What happened?
One evening, many years ago, the sun was setting. It made its way across the sky and as it reached the horizon, as it was about to go down, it got stuck. And it's been stuck there ever since, and so it never gets dark anymore.
How can the sun get stuck? Said Henrietta.
Well, the sun sets in the west, doesn't it?
Yes.
And what do we have in the west?
Henrietta thought about it for a moment. The land of glue.
Exactly.
But that's nonsense. The sun can't get stuck, no matter how much glue you have.
What's that big orange flamey thing over there, then? Asked Dagenham. A particularly bright lemon? A big torch being held by a giant?
Dagenham studied Henrietta's face for a moment.
I'm being sarcastic, you know, he said.
Yes, I realise that, thank you.
I don't know why it's so difficult for you. Sun plus land of glue equals stuck. That's basic glue physics, that is.
Yes, OK.
It's another answer you could have worked out for yourself if you'd taken a moment to examine the evidence before asking a stupid question.
Shut up, Dagenham, said Henrietta. Her sympathy for the grumpy pig had run dry.
Dagenham's eyes grew wide with indignant shock. Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, your royal majesty. Your desire is my pleasure to do. I am your humble pig servant. Please use me as a footstool.
Dagenham had stood up on his chair and was now walking in irritated circles. Henrietta smiled. You're being sarcastic, she said.
You see, you are learning from being with me. I'm a good influence, even on humans.
Right, said Gret, standing and clapping his hands together. That's enough listening to a pig. Time to get moving. I've been saying that for ages, said Henrietta as she stood up and Dagenham jumped huffily from his chair. So, we've left the forest of the tree pigs, said Gret.
Home sweet home, mumbled Dagenham.
And this side of the ravine is basically full of humans.
Because it's called the land of smelly humans, said Dagenham.
I'm sure you can see the problem that's going to cause, said Gret. What? Said Henrietta. Is Dagenham not allowed there? Not Dagenham, you, said Gret. Being a child in underspace is basically illegal. You'll be arrested and they'll put a lampshade on your head. Could we pretend I'm older? Said Henrietta. It's not your age that matters, said Gret. Kids work in the palace until they grow horns. Gret tapped her fingernail against one of his horns. It made a sound like hard wood. Does everyone here have horns? Asked Henrietta. They start growing when you're a teenager, and when they're complete, you're an adult. Anyone without horns gets taken to the palace, where they have to pretend to be a lamp, until their horns start growing, yes. Then they're free to do whatever they want. But Lena, Henrietta said, she'll never grow horns because she's not from here. She'll be trapped in the palace forever. Don't worry, she'll grow horns, said Gret. How? Horn elves. What? Tiny elves that visit you each night to gradually build your horns, Gret explained. How do you think people get horns? By magic? But why would elves build horns on people's heads? Because, said Gret, they're horn elves. The clue's in the name, isn't it? I mean, what else are they going to do? Play the trumpet?
Footnotes. Extract from the complete history and fistory of underspace. Horn elves do not exist. I'll say it again in case you missed it the first time. Horn elves are not real. Only absolute dunderbrains believe in them. And if you meet someone like that, you should probably get as far away from them as possible before you catch stupid. Horn elves are about as real as cheese fairies, who do not bring you free bags of cheese, no matter how often you sing the cheese fairy song. Believe me, I've tried.
People grow horns at a certain age because that's nature, like nose hair or acne. They just turn up one day. That doesn't mean that magic elves did it.
Henrietta pulled at her curls thoughtfully. She wondered if she might be able to shape her hair into horns, if she had enough hairspray and maybe some glue. She didn't much fancy being arrested again, or spending the next few years as a lamp. "So, what are we going to do?" she asked, hoping that Gret would surprise her by having a clever idea.
"We need to give you horns," said Gret.
"Okay, but how do we do that?"
"I don't know. Do you know anybody who owns a shape-shifting machine?"
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Complete History and Fistory of Underspace by Rufus and Howard. If you're excited to find out what happens next and don't want to wait, the complete story is available in paperback, ebook, or audiobook formats from the usual places like Amazon or direct from us at manbycow.com, where you can also find information on the other free shows that we make. We will be very happy to see you there.